the breakfast habits of America and much of the world. And within 20 years from the day he left his brother's employment, Will Kellogg became one of America's 20 wealthiest citizens. Now there's an example of a guy who had some talent that not even he perhaps realized that he had until late in life. Talent is one of the reasons that our incomes will differ in a free and open society. Another reason is industry or industriousness. The fact is some people work harder and longer and better than others. And a third reason is our savings. If somehow the president tonight could equalize all of our material incomes and all of our material wealth, I would argue that for this third reason alone, in no time at all, we'd be unequal again, because some of us would save it and some of us would spend it. So it's illusory to think that government should set itself up to try to equalize people economically. Why should unequal people be equal economically? And so free people are simply not equal, and we should rejoice in the fact that some people take their God-given talents to great lengths and great extents, and the result is great service on behalf of all of us. But it's the second half of this first principle that I think is even more powerfully instructive. Equal people are not free. Show me a place on the planet where people are equal economically, where they all earn the same or possess the same materially, and I would say you have found a very unfree place. Think of it. How could you ever create such a place? If it was your assignment to create an equal society, equal in income, could you do it just by giving speeches? Could you just get up and implore people, please don't earn more than the next guy. Please be happy with what you have. If you have anything more than anyone else has, give it away. Could you do that materially? Could you tell people, please don't invent new things that might cause you to see a nice rise in your income, because then you'd be unequal? Of course not. The only way that you could ever achieve, even if it was desirable, an economically equal society is to put a gun at everybody's head. You'd have to tell people, don't excel, don't be different, don't be better, don't be there first, don't invent something that will vault your firm ahead of the others. And we'd all suffer as a result. And within our lifetimes, we have seen societies that have tried that. The most extreme is Cambodia. In the late 1970s, when the Khmer Rouge communists were in power, they had this radical egalitarian concept that everyone should be equal, except, of course, those in charge. They're special, they're different, they have to live well. But everybody else was to be equal economically, and you were to have nothing unless the government knew of it, sanctioned it, and probably gave it to you. Well, do you know what the end result of that was? After about 3.5 years of Khmer Rouge rule, nearly 2 million people perished out of a population of just 8 million people. All because of this radical egalitarian notion of wanting to make people equal economically. The fact is, free people are not equal, and equal people are not free. That suggests to us that policies of government, of any government, that are intended to forcefully equalize people, to overcome the differences that are manifested in our talents and our industriousness and our savings and other factors, are destined to failure and probably can only be implemented at the point of a gun. It's far better, far more productive to focus on removing whatever barriers there may be that keep people behind, and then let them take their talents to the highest level they possibly can. Far more fruitful and productive than to try to level people and make them equal. Now, if you're wondering, is he going to spend as much time on the other 6 as he did on the first one? No, I spend more time on that one by design, and I'll go through the others a little more quickly. But the second principle is what's yours you tend to take care of. What belongs to everybody or nobody tends to fall into disrepair. What's yours you tend to take care of. What belongs to everybody or nobody tends to fall into disrepair. This principle really just cries out on behalf of the institution of private property. If you want to take the wealth of any society and trash it utterly and very quickly, well, then just take what belongs to those who created it and give it to those to whom who did not create it. Just ignore the principle of private property, make everything common, and you'll find that all of a sudden, few people have any incentive in creating more, but everybody has incentive to simply use and abuse what there is. This explains much of the collapse of the Soviet Empire in Eastern Europe and in the Soviet Union in Russia itself, where the state said, we're going to own it all, we'll be in charge of it, we'll operate it on behalf of the people, and therefore everybody will be sort of like a part owner. But in the end, it was a prescription for economic and ecological disaster. Resources aren't cared for unless somebody can say, that's mine. It's just the way we are. It's just the way we are. When we started the Mackinac Center 18 years ago on a shoestring, for our first few years we had a very tiny staff. But we had events from time to time where we needed to get a picture and put it in a newsletter, but we didn't have a budget that even allowed for a good camera. But I had one that I had taken all over the world with me, so I brought it in and I said, this will be the people's camera. Anytime a Mackinac Center person is out and about and needs to get a picture of an event, you can check out the people's camera here. And let me tell you, I used that camera for 10 years and took good care of it. Nothing ever went wrong with it until it became the people's camera. And within 6 months, the thing was busted and gone for good. And yet this was a staff of people who believe in private property, but it just isn't the same if it's not yours. You just don't tend to it as if it were yours. A third principle, this goes back to a great economist named Henry Hazlitt. And he put it well when he said, sound policy consists of looking at the long run and all people, not just the short run and a few. Sound policy consists of looking at all people in the long run, not just the short run and a handful of people. So much mischief that happens in our legislatures and in Washington is in direct violation of this principle. Put through by people who think, well, this will help this group without looking at what the effects might be on everyone else, or this will take care of the problem for the moment instead of taking care of it for the long run. And sometimes you can, quote, fix something for the moment, but the way you fix it actually creates an even bigger problem down the line. And you're simply not being thorough in your thinking if all you do is look at the effects of a proposal or an act or a policy on a handful of people or for in the here and now. You have to look at both and then make a much better, more informed judgment. John Maynard Keynes was a famous economist of the last century with whom I wouldn't have much agreement. He was an architect of much of our post-war inflation, growth of government, deficit spending. Somebody once asked him, Mr. Keynes, if we follow your advice and government gets bigger, spends more, runs the printing press, runs deficits, won't that mean the dollar will go down in value and maybe become worthless someday? And his famous reply was, in the long run, we're all dead anyway. Which was his way of saying, hey, if it helps us, makes us feel good for now, why not? If somebody down the line in the 1990s or beyond, they get the bill, or if they have problems, well, we'll be gone. Let them worry about it. It was Henry Hazlitt who told us that today is the tomorrow that yesterday's bad policymakers told us that we could safely ignore. And what does it say about our generation if we look so callously upon our offspring, future generations, and hand them problems simply because we wanted to live it up for the moment and let them worry about the consequences? Again, so much mischief would be avoided if we simply were thorough in our thinking. Every time I turn the TV on at night, practically, I find in the news something that makes me think of this fallacy, this mistaken thinking. Nonetheless, let me move on to principle number 4. If you encourage something, you get more of it. If you discourage something, you get less of it.